every investor will have a certainly different set of mindsets. So why don't investors should be normal instead of being rational?
Okay, by the way, rational or normal? I don't understand. What is the difference? As in normal, by normal, what do you mean?
Normal means without any, sir. We talk about rationality where we take certain assumptions, sir, and normal, sir, whether we don't take any assumptions, sir.
Uh, okay. No, I don't know. Normal is not a word that I can put as an opposite of rational. Okay.
Oh,
Can we
yes,
say rational versus emotional or rational versus irrational?
mm, yes, sir.
Okay. So if you say that, is your question, should the investors be rational? Should they be irrational? Is what you're asking, is it?
No, sir, because
Okay.
that will
Okay.
be by polls and that will be very clear
Correct.
to
That is
every one
known.
of us.
Yeah. Huh, huh.
Yes, sir. So
Uh,
rational, where we talk about putting our decision on the basis of some of the assumptions, which are given by our so-called
hmm.
economic
Models. Yeah.
science scholar
Hmm.
and all. And
Hmm. Hmm.
normal is like being human existence characteristics. So, so it should be rational or should be a normal, or
Uh,
we can clear it out in the next session, sir.
no, 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 no. I got your point. See, you're normal, what you're saying, where a human behaves like human, which is what I am calling from market perspective as irrational. For example, me not buying Reliance Industries share, despite rational mind telling me that it's a good stock to buy right now, I'm still choosing not to buy because my past, anchoring of one thought about one bad experience with Reliance Industries is making me think bad about it, or my personal connection with a lot of my friends are working in Infosys, so I have a lot of bonding with Infosys. When I was in Mysore, I used to visit the Infosys campus almost every weekly once. Weekends I would go into my friend's place, and Mysore Infosys campus is beautiful. Now see, that has created an impression in me. While I when even if you come and tell me Infosys, there are better stocks than Infosys, as a rational mind I should be buying a stock which is not better than Infosys. If I want to invest in IT industry, I would still prefer, I'm biased towards Infosys positively. So I'm negatively biased towards. Now, this is my behavior. This is being normal. As a human being, that is what I'm saying. Investors are not. You're assuming investors are, sorry, ideally, investors should be rational, but investors are not rational. Okay. So I think that's the whole debate. It's going to happen throughout this course. Okay. The word rational will be used at least 100 times in every class. Okay. So that is what the course is about. But good question that you asked. So moving forward, I'll just start from the slides. Okay. So we talked about expectation setting. I gave you course structure and all that. Then we talked about what is finance. Okay. And some fundamental concepts of finance we wanted to clear off, and this is what we were doing in the last session. Okay. So with this, let us move forward now. So I'll be using Excel sheet as a whiteboard. Okay. So let's do that. So firstly, we talked about total return. I hope you all recall. Okay. So total return is the return that you how did we write that? Maybe I'll quickly write it again one more time for your memory. So total return. How did we define total return?
Capital gain plus.
Correct. Capital gain plus income. Okay. So we assume that investors are investing for total return, which is capital gain and income. By the way, capital gain is the change in the price of the security from the date of buying to the date of selling. Okay. So then we talked about what is the difference between real and nominal return. Okay. Real and nominal return. Here the concept is inflation. Okay. Now, do recall that no, nominal return is what is the return that is quoted. For example, you go to the bank, you deposit some money, and your fixed deposit, the bank tells you that the interest rate on a fixed deposit is 7%. Okay, so you place the deposit at the end of 1 year. Let's say you deposit today, and end of 2022 January, you withdraw, let's say 1,07,000. Okay, you would deposit 1 lakh, withdraw 1,07,000, and you would assume that you earned a return of 7%. But on a real return basis, okay, really you've not earned 7% because the inflation rate for 2021 was around 4%. So actual return, the net return, the real effective return that you earn is only 3%. Okay, why? 7% is my nominal return, but the value of the money itself has grown by 4% because of inflation. So my real return that I earn is around 3%. Okay, so this is the concept of real return and nominal return. So let that also be in your mind. Then we talked about realized return, okay, versus expected return. Okay, so yeah, what is realized return? Return already earned and capitalized. What does it mean? It means that, let's say for example, I have invested in a stock. Okay, I have invested in a stock last year, and I have received dividend worth, let us say 20 rupees on the stock. Okay, but I have not sold the stock yet. The stock price is 150. Okay, let's do that. Okay, let's say Jan 2020 bought a stock at rupees 100. Okay, let's say June 2020 received dividend of rupees, let's say 20 rupees. Okay, and today is December 2020. Okay, stock yet unsold. I haven't sold the stock yet. Okay,
so please save the screen, sir.
the market price, one second, the market price is 150. Okay, now in this, what is realized return? The open question for you, what is realized return? Realized return is 20 rupees. Why do I say that? Realized means what I have capitalized, what I have withdrawn. That means the money has already come to me. Does it mean that there is also unrealized return? Yes, there is unrealized return, which is how much? Unrealized return is 50 rupees. Why? My stock is 150. I bought it 100 rupees. So 50 rupees of profit is already earned on that. But have I withdrawn it? Have I capitalized it? Have I materialized it? No, not yet. So realized means when you book profits, it becomes realized. If the value on the screen, because this can change. On January 2020, the stock price might come back to 90 again. You never know. Okay. Realized return is the return that you got on hand. Unrealized return is what is on the paper. On the paper, your stock has increased by 50%. Are we clear with this? Realized return concept. Can I have some messages other than Shubham? Can others also talk on the chat box, please? You got no realized return, unrealized return. Important. These are all important because we'll be discussing primarily about return, all across this course. So we all want to be on the same page. Okay, good one. So then, what is expected return? Expected return is, I mean, as the word says, what is the return I might earn during next period, year, or whatever. Next tomorrow, what might be the return? Next 1 year, what might be the return? What is the return I might earn during the next period? That is my question. Okay, we always keep doing this, right? Say when you do valuation of a stock, you exactly do this. You're trying to calculate what might be my expected return that I can earn. Okay, so when you forecast, for example, the return that you might earn on a particular stock, all right, so that basically becomes expected return. All right, now with this we also come to the concept of required return. I think this is where we stopped last class. Okay, required return. Okay, so as the word says, what is the return that is required by an investor? Okay, what is the return that will satisfy an investor? Are you with me? What is the return that will satisfy an investor? Now you need to think like an investor. Think like an investor. You are an investor now. You are an investor. Let's say, for example, you are planning to invest in a fixed deposit. Okay, you're planning to deposit in a fixed deposit. How much return do you expect? You can't see the Excel. Wait a second. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry, it was my sharing mistake. Yeah. So required return, and you are a investor who has some money and you want to invest in fixed deposit. What return do you expect from fixed deposit? Will you be happy if you go to a bank and the bank tells you that they will give you 5% return on fixed deposit? Will you be satisfied with the 5% return on fixed deposit? Guys, you go to a bank and the bank tells you that the fixed deposit rates are 5% for next 1 year. Do you guys know how much is the general fixed deposit FD rates in banks nowadays?
5.25.
5.25. Actually, no, you search for better banks. You can try up to 6.5% you can get. Not really sure if it will be that less. But yeah, okay, fine. Let's say 5.25%. Okay. But a bank tells you that, they will give you 3%. Will you be happy with it? You won't be, right? Why? Because with that 3%, you can earn elsewhere without locking in your money, correct? Even if you put your money in the savings account, for example, which is highly liquid, correct? What is the sacrifice you're doing with fixed deposit? You're sacrificing your liquidity, right? Okay. Well, yeah, theoretically speaking, you can actually withdraw fixed deposit also whenever you want, but at least you're locking in your money for the next 1 year, for example. So for the sacrifice of that liquidity, you need some liquidity premium, correct? So compared to savings account, which will give me like 3 to 4%, I need that extra premium for me to satisfy myself. So that is your expectation, right? Let's say, for example, there is a corporate which is issuing a bond, okay, and the corporate says that I will give you 6% coupon rate. Would you be satisfied with that as an investor? And if not, why? Would you be satisfied with a 6% return on a corporate bond? Corporate bond with a BB grade or B minus grade. Very silent class you have become. Yeah, Shubham, I didn't stop you from talking. You're welcome to talk. I just wanted others also to talk. What is the risk-free rate right now in the market? Anybody? T-bill rates compared to FD, we should be satisfied.
6.2%, sir.
Yeah, 6.25%, right? Now this corporate bond with a B-rated grading. See, you know that your government bond has sovereign guarantee, right? It has a sovereign rating. So basically, there is no default risk at all. So without any risk, without any default risk, you are going to get 6.25%, as you say. Let's say even if it is 6%, and there is this corporate bond which carries with it a risk of default. Corporate can fail, right? There is no sovereign guarantee for that, correct? So naturally, as an investor, you will not be satisfied if that corporate bond also gives you a same 6%. Correct? You need extra premium, which we call it as risk premium, because you're taking extra risk in that. Correct? All right. So please get that. So now required return is basically that. For every investment, I have a certain expected rate of return. Okay. Let's go to corporate finance. Your projects, capital budgeting. Okay. You can't do a calculation of NPV without cost of capital. Correct? So what is that cost of capital? Have you ever thought of it? What is that cost of capital? That cost of capital is the minimum rate of return that I should earn from this project. That cost of capital is nothing but the minimum rate of return that I should earn from this project to satisfy the investors who have invested in this project. Okay, I'll make it even simple for you. Let's say, for example, I have borrowed, let's say 1 lakh rupees from a bank at, let's say 12% rate of interest. Simplest way of explaining, 12% rate of interest. Now I'm investing that 1 lakh rupees in a business. Okay, this business should give me at least 12%. Then only this business is worth. I will be satisfied if I earn anything more than 12%. Correct? No? Okay, so that is basically what is required rate of return. A required rate of return is basically the minimum rate of return that will satisfy an investor, below which he will not be happy that he would have earned any return. Above, that is what we do know. IRR we compare with cost of capital. IRR is the actual return from the project. We compare that with the cost of capital, because that is the required rate of return. Okay, I don't know if you have studied about this concept of economic value added, EVA. EVA basically does that, no? Okay, if what is EVA? EVA is basically, guys, I'm getting a call from your office, so maybe relating to classes. So I'm going to just go away for 1 minute. Okay. Okay, guys, there is a small information to you from your office. There is a webinar that you all need to mandatorily attend at 11 o'clock. Okay, 11 o'clock. And details regarding that has been put up in your notice board or whatever on GCs. GCs is your system, no, where you get all the information. So the details are put in there. So please don't forget it. By 11 o'clock, you have a webinar that you need to mandatorily attend. Okay. So I hope the message is passed. Okay, so coming back to our discussion. Okay, so required rate of return is the minimum rate of return that the investor would expect. In fact, your CAPM model is based on this concept only. Okay, so anyways, we're going to have a complete discussion on CAPM one more time. So I'm skipping that part right now. I will discuss in more detail about CAPM when we go to that particular section. All right, so that is the concept of required return. Then the concept of excess return. Okay, so again, these are all simple words, English words. I'm sure you all will understand. Excess return is how much more I have earned over risk-free rate or required rate. So there are two contexts. Okay, so sometimes we calculate excess return as in comparison of the risk-free rate. For example, if you know about, you would have studied about, let's say, Jensen's alpha. I don't know if you've studied alpha. Alpha basically is what is the return that the portfolio has generated, okay, over the risk-free rate. Okay, say for example, there is a mutual fund, okay, wherein you have earned, let's say, 12% return in the last 1 year, and the risk-free rate on that particular market is around, let's say, 6%. So what is your portfolio, sorry, what is your alpha return or excess return? It is around 6%. Okay, this is basically the concept of excess return. That is, you earn more than the risk-free rate. What is that extra that I've earned over the risk rate? Sometimes in some models we also calculate excess return as in comparison to the required rate of return. Like for example, I told you about EVA, economic value added. Okay, I don't know if you have gone through this. Economic value added is basically measuring the performance of a company in terms of how much value it has generated to the owners of the company. How much value it has generated to the owners of the company. Okay, so how do we calculate EVA? For example, we calculate it using NOPAT. NOPAT is basically operating profit adjusted for taxes. Okay, EBIT into 1 minus T. That is the profit that you have earned. Okay, then what is the capital and what is the cost of capital, which is WACC. So now, focus, observe it very keenly. Capital into WACC is what? Let's say for example, a company has earned a profit, NOPAT of 1,000 million. I'm just putting some random number. Okay, let's say take the second part. The company's capital has been, let's say there is a 5,000 million capital that they've invested, and the WACC of this company is around, let's say for example, 10-15%. Okay, so that, what does that mean? It means that you have earned 1,000, whereas your owners who have invested 5,000 were expecting 15%, means how much? 750. What is 5,000 into 15%? 15% is the minimum required rate of return by your investor, correct? No? And how much capital they have invested? 5,000. So that means they are expecting to earn on 5,000, 15%, 750. How much have you generated? 1,000. So have you added value to them? Yes, you have added excess value of 250 to their wealth, correct? So this is a good performance. correct? What if, just think, what if your NOPAT was 500? Then you would have eroded the value, correct? No, here also what you're doing, this is nothing but excess written, okay? But of course, this is not in percentage, it is in absolute value. Are you following what I'm saying, guys? Can I have some quick feedback here?
Yes.
Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay, clear, no? And also the way I'm going speed faster, because the idea is to just, make sure that we all retouch upon these concepts which you have already studied. So if anything needs more details, so please do tell me, all right? So this is excess return concept. Then we also have the holding period return. Okay. Holding period return is almost similar to realized return, but it's basically for a given period. Let's say, for example, I have invested in a stock for the last 3 years, and today I sold it. Okay, so my holding period is 3 years. So in the 3 years, how much return did I earn? Okay, this need not be a so far whatever return that we talked about, we talked in the annual terms. Holding period return is not so. Okay, for example, say for example, I bought a stock, okay, for rupees 100, okay, in 2017, let's say 2017 Jan, okay, sold the stock for rupees, let's say 350 in 2020 Jan. Okay, what is my holding period? My holding period is 18 Jan, 19 Jan, 20 Jan, 3 years, right? My holding period is 3 years. My HPR is how much? My HPR is 350 by 100 minus 1, correct now? Or 350 minus 100 divided by 100. So which will be around how much? 25%? Sorry, 250%. My holding period return is 250%. Like this, 350 by 100 minus 1. Okay, 2.5. When you convert that into a percentage, it becomes 250%. Okay, so my holding period return is basically not necessarily annualized. It is for the 3 years, how much did I earn totally, point to point. Okay, that is my holding period. Okay, total return I earned, okay, for the entire period of holding an asset. Okay, by holding, what I mean is the date from which I bought to the date which I sold. Okay, that is holding period return. Then we come to arithmetic mean return and geometric mean return. Okay, so we can also use the word average return to refer to this. Okay, average return or arithmetic mean return. Okay, so here what we do is, see, holding period return I talked to you for last 3 years together, right? Now what if I can give you return that I earned on a yearly basis? Say for example, I invested in a stock in 2017. In 2017 I earned, oh my god, okay, 2017 I earned a return, yeah, 2017 I earned a return of 15%. 2018 I earned a return of 20%. Oh god. Okay, is there a message? Okay, 2018 and 2019 I earned, let's say, minus 10%. So for last 3 years, let's add one more, last 4 years, 2020, okay, 2020 I earned around 0% return. Okay, so what is average return? Firstly, each of these are holding period returns. HPR, HPR, HPR for those respective years. Now my average return is, I simply take the average of this, which is my arithmetic average return, which is 6%. What does it? How do you express this? You express this as a annualized return. Okay, few years I earned 20%. In some year I earned minus 10%. But overall, if I take, I have earned 6.25% on an average over the last 4 years. Okay, simple concept. That is basically my arithmetic return. Okay, I hope all of us would have learned this in our SAPM course. So then comes your geometric mean return. What is the other word that we use for geometric mean? Anybody? In a real world, what is the word that we use for geometric mean? Have you heard of this word called CAGR?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Compounded annual growth rate.
Annualized growth rate, correct? Now for this, how will I calculate component average growth rate, annual growth rate?
We will add 1 to all this value and then subtract 1, sir.
Correct. Okay.
And then we'll take
Yeah, we
square of
will,
1 by 4.
yes, 1 plus this, right? So we do this. Okay, and then I'll take geomean. Okay, in Excel we can use a function called geomean to take this. I'm not giving you formula for this, you all must know that, or you can always access it in Google. But basically geomean. So geomean minus 1, sorry. Okay, so the geomean or geometric mean return, which is component average growth rate, is around 5.57%. Okay, compare these two, arithmetic mean return and component average growth return. Okay, so what is that? That means what is component average growth return? What we assume is, okay, let's say when I did 6.25%, okay, one of the things that I assumed is this 15% return that I earn, okay, the first year will in turn earn 6.25% on the interest, okay, which is actually not correct. So we do a reverse calculation and see if some stock has grown from one level to the other level, how much it must have grown on a yearly basis. Okay, so 5.57% if you apply on a stock price, it will give you all these return 15%, 20%, minus 0%. Finally, it will end at this, which is equivalent to earning, for example, in another way, if I have to explain, it is equivalent to earning 5.57% for all the 4 years. Okay, so that is what geomean or geometric mean return is. Know that arithmetic mean return will always be higher than geometric mean return. Okay, yeah, cool. So then we come to expected return in uncertain economic environment. Okay, this is something which you might not have, you might have again learned. Okay, expected return in uncertain economy. Okay, so what we do here is we try to project for probable, okay, economic scenario in the market. We try to see that. Okay, so the probable economic scenario, we can say it will be a boom economy, it will be normal economy, or it can be worst economy. Okay, so accordingly what we do is we try to assign a probability, a subjective estimate of a probability. So a boom economy, for that matter, will have, like, let's say a probability of, I don't know, I'm trying to guess for 2021. Let's say I would expect that there will be an economic boom. There is a 40% chance for that. Okay, normal economy, there is a, I don't know, 20% chance. Okay, and or not 20, 30% chance, and maybe another 30% chance that it will be another worst economy. We are getting mixed feelings now, correct, in the market, right? So once you have the probability, then you put the expected return in each such case. Okay, let's say if the economy is boom, if the economy does really well in 2021, okay, this particular stock or this particular index, for example, will generate a return of 25%. I'm being hopeful. If it's a normal economy, don't expect anything beyond 10%. If the economy is worst, you might lose, let's say 20%. Okay, of course, how we arrive at these numbers, for each of them there are models, but I'm just putting some random numbers. So then what you do is you take a weighted average return of this, correct? You take a weighted average return of this like this. Yeah, so the expected return from this stock, because of uncertain economic condition, okay, would be around 7%. See, it would be very nice if we all could know the future. Okay, so if I know that 2021 is going to be worst economy, I know that I'm going to lose 20%, so my investment decision becomes easier. Okay, or if I know that my economy is going to be boom, that is bull run in the next 1 year, I'll be happy to see 25% return and I'll pull in all money and put it. But unfortunately, largely you will not have clarity on the economy, especially now when the world is so volatile. So many things are happening together, so we are unable to actually predict. The economy is really, really uncertain. When I say economy, overall markets, overall financial markets, overall systems. Okay, so when such situation, we try to give equal weightage to each, or whatever weightage to each kind of economy, and we calculate a weighted average method. Okay, that is basically expected return in an uncertain economy. Okay, so this is another written concept that we need to know. All right. So clear? Are we clear with this written concept so far, all of you? Any questions on this? Any other written concept that you have studied and I have not discussed here? Are we all fine? Can I go ahead? Next we'll have to discuss risk part.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not solving problems for you because you would have done all of that already. So no point in solving problems. I'm consciously choosing not to. Maybe I'll give you some assignment for the first chapter, which will have problem solving for these. So which you can always refer to your books and you can always do it. I will not be using my class time to solve problems, all right? Unless it is going to be new for you. Okay. So it's more like giving you a stock of what we've been learning so far. All right. So moving forward for the risk concepts, okay? So it's always like that, okay? Once you learn written, you also need to learn risk, okay? Firstly, my first question is risk versus uncertainty. Let us have some clarity on this. And it's a very, very, very important concept for our behavioral finance, all right? We all need to understand what is risk and what is uncertainty, okay? I'll tell you something. As an investor, you should be scared of uncertainty, but not of risk. Can you believe me when I say this? Okay, be scared as an investor because you cannot control uncertainty. You cannot do anything about uncertainty. But yes, for risk, you have ways to manage risk. I'm not saying you can eliminate risk, but there are ways to manage risk. Okay, but uncertainty you don't have. So in that context, what is the difference between risk and uncertainty? Okay, let me clarify. Or maybe I'll throw open it for the class. So can you all like try to guess what might be the difference between risk and uncertainty? Anybody? There's one primary difference between risk and uncertainty. You can even give an example to make me understand. Nobody? Miss Padmini, Ramachandra, Shodhan. Okay. All right, no problem. Okay, so basically my way of understanding this is like this, okay? Risk is something which is known and measurable. You might be wondering how we will know risk, okay? You can actually know risk and it is measurable, okay? I will tell you something. Say, for example, one of the risk item for a company is a competitor's action, okay? A competitor's action. Now, that is a risk. Why? Because we know that competitor will definitely take some action, okay? And with reasonably, we should be able to also assess the impact of competitors' action on our sales. Don't you agree? Okay, we should be able to know. Or for example, you would have all studied about strategic management. So let's say, for example, I am operating in an industry, and sorry, is there someone who's talking? Okay. I'm operating in an industry and I will have a risk management team, correct? So the risk management team will always continuously keep assessing the risk, isn't it? They keep assessing the risk. They keep coming out with, these are the risk items. These are the things that can go wrong. Government might come out with some regulations. Government might increase the GST rate on our car, for example, correct? Or maybe this new regulation is coming which is going to cause something. For example, all the education industries today, we are looking forward for the NEP, new education policy. If that comes in, there will be a lot of change in the way we manage education industries, right? So these are risks that are known to us and we almost will be able to measure it. When I say risk can be measured, okay, you can measure it in terms of the probability. Risk is measurable in terms of probability and impact. Okay, if you recall, just a while ago, I showed you the calculation of expected return in uncertain economy. What did we do? We said, what is the probability of a worst economy, correct? We measured the probability. Okay, And then we also knew the impact. If that event occurs, if the economy is going to be worst, then I'm going to lose 20%, correct? So I could measure the probability and also the impact, correct now? So that is basically risk. Then what is uncertainty? Uncertainty is something which cannot be measured, which is even not known. Something can completely go wrong. Okay, I don't know. People say that, you know, the bio war that happened just now with the coronavirus, right? People knew about this. Okay, Bill Gates, for example, has been telling about one of the threat for humanity is a pandemic or a virus spreading. You know, way back in 2014, 15, he's been telling that, he's been investing in virus. That's the news, right? So, but having said that, how many businessmen across the world, how many, let's say, small and medium enterprises in India, for example, have ever thought that such a situation might come? Correct? Right? This was completely unknown, and we could also not measure the impact and impact of it, or even the probability of it. Hope you're following this, right? So uncertainty is something which cannot be measured. Uncertainty is something unknown or non-measurable. Okay, now that is, now I'm telling you, because you know the risk, you can do something about it. Okay, but uncertainty, because you don't know. See, some natural calamity might happen and my business can completely, you know, doom, right? Now that is unknown for me and I cannot do anything about that, correct? Whereas risk is measurable, and you know what Peter Drucker said, no, what is measurable is manageable, or if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So now that I know I can measure my risk, I can do something about it. What I can do, maybe I can go for you know, some kind of you know, strategy to eliminate the risk. I can try avoiding the risk itself. I can try bringing down the impact. I can try to transfer the risk by taking derivative contracts, for example. Okay, or I can take an insurance plan and I can transfer the risk, whichever risk I'm talking about. Okay, or if I can't do anything, I can even at least be prepared to accept it, right? So that is basically risk, and uncertainty is something which we don't know, right? So just give me 1 second. I'm going to connect my charger. I just need a minute from you. Yeah, back. That is basically the concept of risk and uncertainty. Now, in the same concept, let us also talk about upside risk and downside risk. I'm sure downside risk is something which you would have already heard of this word. Okay, most of the capital market, you know, participants keep using this word of downside risk. What is the probability that, you know, the markets will fall, you know, below support level, below resistance level, whatever it is, right? Those kind of technical jargons being used. So that is basically downside risk. Okay, I'm not sure if you have studied this concept of value at risk. Have you studied value at risk? Anybody? Value at risk, have you studied? Okay, value at risk is basically, you might have studied, but maybe you're not remembering. Okay, so value at risk is, let's say, let's say, for example, what is the maximum loss I might incur in the portfolio, okay, in the next 1 month with 95% confidence. Okay, let's say if I'm a fund manager, mutual fund manager, or a portfolio manager, I will calculate VAR. Okay, value at risk is a very famous concept called VAR. Okay, if you don't know it, please do go to any financial management textbook or go to YouTube and please do learn about value at risk. It's going to be really, really important in the coming days. Okay, so if you don't know it yet already, or maybe some other subject might cover it for you. So what is the maximum loss I might incur in the portfolio in the next 1 month with 95% confidence? Let's say I have a portfolio of, let's say, 100 million. Okay, my VAR for next month, okay, is, let's say, for example, 20 million. Based on how I calculate, I'm not telling you, but when you calculate, let's say your answer is 20 million. What does it mean? It means that out of my 100 million, there is 95% chance that my maximum loss is going to be 20 million. Okay, would you not be interested in knowing about such, number? Correct. That is why Basel norms, for example, Basel norms, if you know the code, the standards, which are regulations that govern the central banks of all the entire world, and through that banking companies have to manage a certain level. They need to manage the VaR at such a level, which is specified as a percentage by the Basel norms. Okay, so VaR is not just in the banking, even in portfolios, even in companies also, you do calculate VaR to keep your loss in check. Okay, so at any point of time, you need to know how much might be the loss that can occur for you. Okay, now that is basically a downside risk. Why it is a downside risk? I'm telling from 100 million, it can go down up to 80 million. Correct. Now, then what is upside risk? Upside risk is basically, we also use the word positive risk for that. That means something might happen in future, which I don't know yet, okay, but it is going to benefit me. For example, let us say I'm an automobile company. And there is a lobbying that is happening by all the automobile companies with the government right now, requesting the government to reduce the GST rates on passenger vehicles. Okay, GST rates, I don't know, right now it's around 28% or something like that, if I'm not wrong, or 18%. They're requesting for it to be brought down. Okay, now the government is dilly-dallying, they're trying to think whether it can be done and all that. So maybe during this budget they might do that. Okay, so maybe on the day of budget, 1st February, probably the GST rates on the passenger vehicles might be brought down. If that comes down, it may happen, it may not happen. There's a probability. If it happens, it is a positive risk for me. It is an upside risk for me. Okay, so the point is, you don't have to consider risk as a negative word, even though it creates that negative, connotation in our mind. There can be positive risk also. In fact, when you learned your SWOT analysis, SWOT, SWOT analysis, you studied about 2 external factors, opportunities and threats. Remember? Now your threat is nothing but negative risk or downside risk. Your opportunity is a positive risk. Got it? So that is basically the concept of risk and uncertainty, and upside risk and downside risk. Right? So then we come to the important part here. And now I want at least one of you to tell me what is this. And you can't tell me that you have not studied this in action. I'm sure you know it. Your SAPM would have started with this. What is systematic risk? What is unsystematic risk? You guys have decided that you will not participate in the class and came to my class.
Sir.
Yeah. Good.
Systemic risk is an which cannot be avoidable.
It would help if you can tell me your name and start.
Ramchandran Bharat.
Oh, Ramachandra. Okay. Good.
Systemic risk which cannot be avoidable. I mean, it's diversified. Whereas in unsystematic, we can be diversified.
Okay, you are saying system. I'll write it for you. Okay, I'll write what you're telling me. Okay, systematic risk and unsystematic risk. You are telling systematic risk is diversifiable, is it?
Which cannot be diversified.
Cannot be diversifiable. Okay, can I use the word undiversifiable risk? Okay, whereas this is diversifiable risk. Okay, Padmini says market risk was default risk. Okay, what is that? Which is market risk, Padmini? Systematic. Let's stick to this jargon. Okay, systematic and unsystematic. Which is market risk?
Sir, I am Sandeep.
Sandeep.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, systematic risk is cannot be controllable, sir.
Systematic risk is uncontrollable. Okay.
Unsystematic risk is controllable, sir.
Controllable. Okay. Almost we both are meaning the same. Okay. And Padmini says systematic risk is market risk. Okay. Market risk. Okay. And in the same context, can I say this is firm specific risk? Padmini, will it make sense if I say firm specific risk and systematic risk is a firm specific risk?
Yes, sir. Business risk.
Correct, no? Business risk or firm specific risk. Good. I guess you all understand what it is. The way I would also want you to remember this is to not get confused. Generally happens when I was a student, it used to happen. Systematic risk is applicable for the entire system. So when I say entire system, entire economy, entire industry, entire world, correct? So that is, for example, a COVID-19 kind of a situation, a pandemic or a lockdown or some war between two countries, okay? Or let's say, for example, increasing the GST rate on automobiles, that will affect the entire automobile industry, that will affect entire economy, correct now? Okay, whereas, say, for example, some managerial goof up, okay, or a fraud happening in a company. One of the managers, CFO, gets into some fraudulent activity and gets arrested because of that. Now, that happening is a unsystematic risk, which will affect only that company. Correct? So I'm sure with the kind of answers I've got, I kind of know that you all understand. Just I have one more small question to ask you. I will tell you later, but I am just curious to know, how do you measure systematic risk and unsystematic risk? How do we measure systematic risk and unsystematic risk?
I guess beta.
As in what statistical parameter that you calculate?
Beta, sir.
Beta measures what?
Market risk.
Beta measures the
Market risk.
okay, and unsystematic risk, can you measure?
No, sir.
Standard
Okay.
deviation.
Actually, no. Okay, actually, no. What happens is your total risk of a company is measured by systematic risk plus unsystematic risk. Okay, this is not a mathematical equation I'm writing. Okay, it is not a mathematical equation. It is just an explanation of the relationship. So the total risk of a company can be classified as systematic risk and unsystematic risk. Of that, total risk is measured by standard deviation. Okay, systematic risk is measured by beta, plus unsystematic risk cannot be measured. Okay, why unsystematic risk cannot be measured? Because firm specific risks are uncertain. Somebody, I told you an example, right? Of fraudulent activity in the finance department of a company. Now, you cannot measure what will be the impact. It can be a case like what happened with Satyam or Enron, okay, wherein the entire company has to literally shut down. Correct? No, the scale can be that big, or there can be smaller cases also. Every day it keeps happening in every company, some fraudulent activities going on. Okay, which will, of course, do some damage, but not to the extent that the company will close down. Correct? Now? So unsystematic risk is more connected with uncertainty. Therefore, we will not be able to measure it. But conceptually, we should know that standard deviation measures the total risk. Beta is just a component of that. Okay, beta is helping you to measure the systematic risk. Okay, let us be clear on that. Let us not say that unsystematic risk is measured by standard deviation. No, standard deviation measures the total risk. Okay, just keep that thing in mind. All right, so good. And then we try to understand diversification risk. Okay, or basically I wanted to use the word diversifiable risk, which you already told me. Okay, diversifiable risk. Okay, so many of you told me that systematic risk cannot be diversified, whereas unsystematic risk can be diversified away. Correct? So basically, diversification is a is a concept or a technique that you will use to bring down the risk, bring down the unsystematic risk in your portfolio. Say, for example, you have 5 stocks. Let's say you have a stock, okay, whose unsystematic risk is at some level. That can be brought down by investing into multiple stocks from different industries which are not correlated with each other. Okay, that is the concept of diversification. We will be discussing more about this when we come to what is called as modern portfolio theory. Okay, the next topic is that only. We are going to come to modern portfolio theory, okay, which is given by Harry Markowitz, who basically introduced the concept of diversification. We will talk about that in detail later. Now, what are the measures of risk? Okay, measures of risk. Now, again, unless you want me to solve it, I'll solve the problem. Otherwise, let us not do it. I'm sure you all know this concept. Okay, say for example, variance and standard deviation. I talked about this, correct? Variance and standard deviation. Okay, all of you know how to calculate the standard deviation for a stock. Can we do that? Okay, maybe I'll quickly do it. Okay, will not take much time. We will simply we will go to, let's say, Yahoo Finance, and we will download some stock price. Tell me some stock. Maybe I'll take Infosys only. Okay, Infosys historical price. Okay, I'm typing in Google. I got it. Infosys in a stock. Hope you are seeing. I'm showing a website to you. All right. So through a website, I'm downloading the historical data. Say, for example, I will download for last 5 years. Okay, monthly closing prices I will download. Apply. Okay, download. Open it. Okay, so in this, okay, by the way, I'm just rushing fast. Okay, if you want me to do anything slowly, tell me. Okay, so we take this out. We have the adjusted close price of Infosys here. Okay, I will now calculate the return on Infosys. Okay, maybe I'll calculate the log rit on Infosys. Okay, logarithmic return I will calculate. So which will be basically ln. Okay, first let me calculate return on Infosys. Return in fee. So current price minus the previous day price minus 1. Correct. This is my return on Infosys. Then I will take the log rit. Okay, log rit in fee. So I will use ln function. Do this. Okay, so I have the log return. One second. Divided by this. Let's do this. So yeah, this is sufficient. I don't need this. Okay, I've just converted the returns as ln returns. Okay, so on this I will calculate the standard deviation. Okay, so STDEV, all right, of this. Okay, so the standard deviation of Infosys returns is around 7.25%. Maybe, just to complete the whole thing, I'll also calculate the average return. Okay, so the average return is around 1.8%, 1.8% per month. Okay, so if required, you can convert this into an annual return also. Okay, so annual return is how much? 1.8 into 12, n per y is 12. Yeah, so annual return approximately we are talking about 23.88%, whereas the standard deviation is around 7.285%. Okay, so clear, no? So this is my standard deviation. Okay, so based on this, we can calculate further analysis can be done. For example, I can calculate a coefficient of variation on this, right? So what will be my CV? This is my AM, this is my SD, and I will calculate my coefficient of variation also. So coefficient of variation will be standard deviation divided by arithmetic mean return. Okay, which is basically around 30.51%. I don't say it's good or bad. I will compare it with another stock, and then I will decide on the risk element of Infosys. Correct? How much risky is the Infosys stock? So that was one thing that we should have learned. So variance is another form of standard deviation. Okay, so that is one measure. Then you have range. Okay, range is basically the maximum return minus the minimum return. Then CV is basically a relative measure of risk. Okay, so we discussed that. Then the concept of beta. Okay, so beta, as you already know, so let me quickly calculate beta for Infosys. Maybe I will take the Nifty index itself. Can we take Nifty index? Okay, and download the stock price for Nifty index. I'll take Nifty as my proxy index. Okay, so okay, let's take this column and put in our Infosys page. Okay, so let's see if I can insert cut cells. Yeah, so this is my Nifty, and I will calculate log RIT of Nifty. Okay, so which can be done by copying this formula itself, right? So copy this. So now basically leave this. Basically, I have the logarithm of Infosys and Nifty using the slope function. Simple. Using the slope function, I would take Infosys as Y and this as X. So the beta of this stock, okay, based on the details that we have now, is around 0.58. Okay, so 0.58 is the beta of Infosys based on our last 5 years data that we have taken. Okay, Infosys has been more stable in the last 5 years, to be more precise. So it was between 2012, 13, 14. It was very volatile. After that, it's become a little, calm down stock, right? So that is basically variance, standard deviation, CV. Then you have the beta we calculated. Then you also calculate, things like correlation coefficient. Correlation, as you know, tells you the association between two, stock prices in our example. Covariance tells you the variance of a stock, 2 or 3 stocks when they move together. Okay, so their behavior changes when they are joined together. Okay, so that was basically the concept of covariance. All right. So with this basic background, now we will get into what is called as individual risk profile and indifference curve analysis. Okay, I'm stopping here because we have like 9 minutes. I need to take your attendance also. But with this basic background, we will use this, and next class when you come, we are actually going to understand how you build a indifference curve for individual investor, and how the investor will choose such a parameter which will optimize his risk and return. Okay, it's very important that we understand how a rational investor ideally should be choosing a particular stock. For example, when we talked about efficient front end, I'm sure you would have discussed that in your, when you discussed modern portfolio theory. When you create an efficient front end, we are almost assuming that the investor will choose the most optimum portfolio, which need not be true, is what is the whole crux of behavioral finance. Okay, so with all this, I'm moving into that. All right, so next class is going to be the real eye opener for you in terms of all these return and risk concepts, how they will turn into defining the individual's behaviors. All right, so we'll slowly move into that direction. I think we are meeting again on Saturday. Okay, so when we meet, we will discuss in detail. All right, so I'm stopping here. I'll give you 2-3 minutes. You can ask me any questions that you have. Meanwhile, I'll just open the GCs to take your attendance. Any questions, any discussion points, you're welcome.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, I'm Gokul, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, we don't know Excel functions relating to statistics. If you could slow
guys,
down a bit from the next class, that would be better.
No. Don't get confused. With this. This course is not about the functions. Okay. You know the concept of beta, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's all I want.
What you calculated, the end result, we could analyze it, sir. But the process which you did on data,
I'll do one thing. We'll see. Okay, fine. You are requesting separately if I can cover that also.
Yes, sir. Just if you can slow down a bit, explaining function. That
Sure.
would be
I'll do that. Maybe what I'll do is I will separately record a video. Okay. And share it with you, especially, let's say, for example, how to calculate average return, mean return, let's say standard deviation, beta, correlation for a given stock. Okay, I'll record a video and share it with you. You can practice it.
That would be better, sir. Thank you.
We'll do that. Plus, in the class, if you have doubt, you bring it, and in the class we will discuss.
Sure, surely. Right? Thank you.
So, yeah, please, you're welcome to put request. But I'm sorry, that is not the purpose of this course. We don't have to really learn that in this course. Anyways, good point. I take your point. Okay, just give me 1 minute. I'm opening your attendance. Sessions, no. Home, behavioral finance, batches, your section A, right? So sessions, I will add a session now. Any other questions, guys, on the topic concepts that we are discussing? Please feel free now. 21st January, 9 a.m. to you need to do a lot of reading, okay, for this subject. This is a theory subject. To be honest with you, this is a complete theory subject. Okay, yes, there are some numericals and excels in between we'll be using, but this subject is going to connect all your finance learning. All right, so be ready to read a lot. All right, in fact, I'm going to give you one small exercise now before you come for the next class. Meanwhile, let me take your attendance. I will share the screen of my attendance. Okay, yeah, I hope you can see it. Gijo Daniel, quick. Gijo Daniel. I'm marking you absent. Pindi Umesh.
Present, sir.
Ashwati Anand. Ashwati Anand. Are you there, Ashwati? Okay. I'm marking you absent. Kirorsa Tedes. Which is your first
present,
name?
Sir.
How do you call you? How do I call you?
Tadese, sir. Tadese.
Tadese. Tadese. Okay.
Tadese. Yes.
Tadese. All right. All right. Zineb Honja Balcha.
Yes.
How do I
Yes,
call you?
Zannavar.
Zennever. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Anas Emad Kanbar.
Yes, sir.
Anas, is your name
Yes.
is Anas? Can I call
Yes,
you Anas? Great.
Anas.
Yes, yes, Anas. Swati,
Okay.
Present, sir.
Arpita,
Present, sir.
Shamita,
Present, sir.
Anisha,
Present.
Asis Kumar Mahalik.
Present, sir.
Your name is Asis, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Amrut,
Present, sir.
Kirtana, MS. All right. Kirtana, I'm marking you absent. Kirti,
Present, sir.
Gokul,
Excuse me, sir. Kirtana present.
Kirtana, you're present? Okay.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't.
All right. Gokul,
Present, sir.
Ajmal,
Present, sir.
okay. Nesra,
Present, sir.
Nikita,
Present, sir.
okay, got it. Priyanka,
Present, sir.
Ragul,
Yes, sir.
Ramachandran.
Present, sir.
Hey, by the way, what is your name? Ramachandran or Bharat?
Bharat.
Bharat, is it? Okay, okay. Bharat. Ramanan,
Present, sir.
Ranjit,
Present, sir.
Tawad,
Present, sir.
okay. Vijay,
Present, sir.
Deepika, M.
Present, sir.
Okay. Deepti,
Present, sir.
Ellen Chelian,
Yes, sir.
Jeevan.
Present, sir.
Absent, sir.
Hey, who is absent?
Present, sir. Present.
Okay. Jeevan, Pritam, are you present?
Present, sir.
Okay. Khwaja, okay. How do I call you? Shahnawaz or Khwaja?
Shanwal, sir.
Shahnawaz. Okay. Menaka,
Present, sir.
okay. Yusha,
Present, sir.
Yusha, right? I'm correctly pronouncing your name.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Nikhil,
Present, sir.
Padmini, I saw you in the chats. Pritam Ishwarappa, okay. Pritam UK,
Present, sir.
okay. Padmini, see if you can, before I end, I'm marking you absent because you didn't answer. Pritam Ishwarappa, marking absent. Pritam present. Satyashri,
Present, sir.
Samriddhi,
Present, sir.
okay. Sandeep,
Present, sir.
Satish,
Yes, sir.
Satvik,
Present, sir.
Sheetal,
Present.
Shodan,
Yes, sir.
okay. Shodan done. Shubham,
Present, sir.
Purti,
Yes, sir.
Swati, one second. Swati done. Tarun,
Present, sir.
Umeshwaran, okay. Umeshwaran, I'm marking you absent. Yash Jain,
Present, sir.
Alok Kumar,
Chat box, sir.
okay, he's applied in the message. Okay. Amok,
Present, sir.
Anushri,
Present, sir.
Ashish Kumar.
Present, sir.
Padmini, I saw your chart, so I don't know why you are not answering your thing. I'm still marking you present. Okay. So Padmini Devi RS. Okay. Thank you guys. Hope the session was useful. I would See you on Saturday. All right. I will put a message in the GCs here regarding one of the small assignment I want to give you for today. Okay. So check your GCs today by evening for my class. There'll be a very small assignment I'll be giving you. All right. Thank you guys. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.